How's it going? You guys feeling bold after that amazing talk from Lynn? I certainly do. So I thought I would start off today by telling you guys a little bit about myself and my accidental journey into becoming a project manager. Yeah. Because I think it's relevant to the topic today about technology. So just to give you a little background, I started off working for a department store in Boston. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of Filene's. It doesn't exist anymore. Yeah, some hands. All right. So I worked for Filene's, and I started off as a tech support guy, and I fixed cash registers and receipt printers. So believe it or not, it was a long time ago. It was 20 years ago. So from there, I moved on to working in their corporate office, and I worked as a desktop support technician, helping out all the buyers with their problems and telling them that you probably just need to restart and you're good. And then from there, it moved on to getting into kind of like network admin role. It was a Windows NT 4.0 network, so it was pretty old. And then after that, I moved on to another company. It was a mortgage origination firm, and I became their actual network administrator. Worked with them as they grew to have multiple locations, and they had hundreds and hundreds of users. And they had this one application that was there. It was a client-server-based application. And so as they were growing, they were finding that it was pretty difficult for them to be able to manage and sync data from one location to the next. It's problematic. And so they decided, hey, we have this great idea. Let's build our own web-based loan origination system. And they're like, you, Matt, you know a lot about this software. How about you become the product owner? And so I became the product owner, and over the course of a couple of years, I oversaw an interface with the project manager on the development team side, and we built this massive Java-based application that was web-based, and it was pretty cool. And I started to learn a little bit more about the web, about different web technologies. I taught myself to code a little bit, so I could code in ASP, and I knew some front-end stuff, and I thought it was pretty good, pretty technically savvy. And so then from there, I moved on to my next job, which was a digital project manager. I got a role at a small agency up in Massachusetts. I was their first digital project manager, and then I moved on to Oomph, where I am now. So recently, as I became responsible for overseeing the project management team there at Oomph, and also hiring various people to come in and fill PM roles, I started to wonder, well, what is it that made me good at my job? What are some of the things? Obviously, as project managers, we have a very specific set of skills, right? And it makes us good at what we do. But beyond that, were there things that I could do that lended to my abilities and enhanced them and made me a little bit better? So I started to wonder, how technical should we be as DPMs? Just what capabilities, what abilities should we focus on and try to develop? And just how far do we want to go in order to be ultra successful at what it is that we do? So I asked that question, but then I answered it with a question. Does it even matter, right? Is it really even important for us as PMs, digital PMs, to have like super technical ability? And if you think about it, it's a good question to ask. Why? Well, what are the main goals for us as digital project managers? What are the things that we need to do to be successful on a day-to-day basis? I'm just going to list out a couple. There's many, many, many more, I'm sure, and you might even debate me on my list, but that's okay. So 5 things that I think are really important for project managers. The first one, hit deadlines, right? We're responsible. We need to try to the best of our ability to deliver the projects, the products, the things that we're working on time. Be it major release cycles, be it a sprint cadence, or if we're delivering an alpha, a beta, and then the actual live website on a certain schedule. It's our job to manage the schedules and make sure that we hit those things to the best of our abilities. Second, managing the backlog and the budget, right? So that's our job. We need to make sure that we're successfully delivering upon the features that are required within the given scope of work, but we want to do so in a way that is successful and still makes money for us as an organization. Be it you work for an agency, or if you work in-house, you still have a specific budget that you need to work to during the course of a given project, year, something like that. So again, it's our job to make sure that we manage our budgets successfully. Resource or talent coordination, right? Don't you need to make sure that you have the right person in the right place at the right time? And that could be difficult. I've heard lots of conversation about the challenges that we have. We've tried to come up with different solutions for it, be it super structured cross-functional teams versus having maybe some sort of a traffic manager or somebody. You've got to work together, particularly as your groups grow, to be able to coordinate and put those people in the right places. Quality control. It's our job to make sure that whatever is the end product, that it is a quality deliverable. Wouldn't you agree? You may oversee the QA process. You may oversee some sort of user acceptance testing, all the different testing function that goes into making sure that you have a good deliverable. And if you do these things, then you want to ensure satisfaction, right? We need happy clients. Clients can be external or they can be internal facing. But regardless of who the client is, it's our job to make sure that we have happy clients, right? We want them to keep coming back, keep wanting to work with us and our teams over and over again. So you look at those 5 things. Which of those things says technical? Not one of them, right? They really don't say that you need to be super technical to do any of these things. So that leads me back to my question that answered the question, or responded to the question, how technical should a digital PM be? Does it even matter? I don't know. To illustrate, though, the importance of it, I like to go with the example of building a house. So imagine you're building a new home, right? Has anybody here ever actually built their own home or worked with? Yeah, okay, so there's a couple of hands. Would you say that it's like a super easy process that is not stressful? No, of course not. So now imagine that you decide, like you find this beautiful plot of land, you've got these beautiful plans, architectural plans, and you're going to build a new home. And so you're looking to find a general contractor to oversee the process, right? And you start interviewing various contractors, and you're talking to this one guy or person, they seem fantastic, and then you find out like, oh yeah, like, no, I've never actually used power tools in my life before. Or like, I've never picked up a hammer and nails, right? Or like, you're talking about something on the build, and they're like, oh, what's a truss? Like, what's a joist? What's a wall? Like, would that instill confidence in you? No, of course not. You'd be like, get this person out of here, right? So it matters to you that the person that is building your home has experience in using the tools, in being familiar with the processes, the things that it takes to safely and properly complete the construction of your dream home. So when it comes to building maybe a website, building an app, running a campaign, launching some major campaign, right? It's not an everyday occurrence for these people. And just like for you, if you're building a home, it's not something you're going to do all the time. It's probably something you might only do once. And in your opinion, it's like the most important thing ever. It has to be done correctly. And so the same could be said of our clients, right? This is not their job. They don't do this. It's not an everyday occurrence for them. So for them, they just kind of assume that we've got some sort of skill, some technical chops, that we understand how the application, the website, the product, the campaign, whatever it is that we're building and constructing for them, that we have some experience in that avenue, and that we have the ability to make sure that it is done and it is done correctly. So does it matter? Yeah, it really does. It matters that we have some level of technical ability and experience. So, but the question then is, how much do you need, right? How far should you go? To what level of technical ability should you rise? And I like to give my answer early. That way, if you guys got like emails you need to check, you can go do that. And then you're like, I already got the point of his talk. Okay, so how technical should a digital PM be? It depends. Yeah, I didn't give it away. But that's the answer. That's the God's honest truth. It really does depend. But what does it depend upon? depends upon the complexity of the product, project, app, website, campaign, whatever it is that you're working on, right? Your ability, your skill level kind of needs to measure up, so to speak, and it needs to be commensurate with the complexity of the project that you're working on. So let's take some examples here. Let's start small, right? So let's say you're making or you're overseeing some small marketing website, some app. Maybe it's like a simple wrapper app, or maybe you've got like a really small campaign. It's not like this massive omni-channel like campaign that you're launching. You know, it's pretty simple. It's got a limited scope, limited budget. It's pretty small, right? It's pretty contained. It's not that complex. So if you were relatively new or junior, you might feel comfortable managing that. Maybe you don't have a ton of technical ability. That's okay, because again, it's kind of small. But then you start to add to it, right? You start to add layers of complexity on, and it's got some sort of login system now. Maybe it's integrating with some sort of third-party single sign-on application, and you've got to do some custom integration there, right? I know that for me personally, like SSOs, oh man, they can be the bane of your existence. There's a CRM integration, okay? So you've got the client, they're not like, oh, we want to just use HubSpot and there's a module or a plugin that I can use to easily integrate. They're like, no, I have this super random third-party CRM that you've never heard of in your life, but they have APIs, you can integrate with it. So you've got to manage that, right? What about a multilingual website? Translating websites is way, 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 way harder than you would think it is. You've got to think about so much, right? How are you getting the translation into the system? Are you using some sort of a third-party service in order to be able to do that? What about the different languages that you're going to be translating it into, right? Are they all going to be Latin-based languages, or are they going to start using other characters? Do they read in that language from left to right, or from right to left? Other way around for you guys, right? It gets complex. But then, like, let's add more layers onto it. Maybe it's some sort of like super custom thing that is like enterprise, and it's for like a really large organization. There's performance SLAs to it. They're like, okay, this thing has to be able to handle some sort of 1 hour long endurance stress test with a minimum of 500 concurrent users, and it has to have a response time of 3 seconds or less for every single page. You're like, whoa, okay, yeah, that's pretty complex. And then you got to start working with the DevOps team, right? And the DevOps are talking about CI/CD pipeline. Let's integrate this and that. And you're like, what are you talking about? I have no clue. And then this is kind of one of my favorites. Anybody like doing e-commerce projects? No, yeah, right? Oh, taxes and shipping and coupon codes and product variants, and it gets really, really complex, right? So you can see as it grows, so shouldn't your technical ability, right? Your experience level. So to, again, just further illustrate this, we're going to play just like a super quick little game. It's called Would You Be Comfortable? And it's not awkward, don't worry. It's very simple. It's not awkward stuff. Okay, so by a show of hands, would you be comfortable, I love construction illustrations, managing the construction of a comfy doghouse for Scout? Now, okay, most hands are up. Okay, so Scout, that's not my dog, but that is my dog's name. Now what's interesting is this doghouse is pretty simple, right? You're like, why would I even build it? I'd just go to Home Depot and buy one. Dog houses, when I was looking for pictures for this presentation, are wicked elaborate these days. It's pretty crazy what people do for their pets. Okay, so everybody here pretty much was like, yeah, I could build that. Not only could I oversee it, I could probably just build it myself. Okay, but would you be comfortable managing the construction of a new shed for your backyard? Okay, still a lot of hands, right? Okay, so you're like, big box store, I'll go buy one. Put it in my backyard. Easy. That's how I'm going to manage this thing. Okay. What about being the general contractor overseeing the build of your dream home? Oh yeah, there's still a few hands that are up, but like less people are comfortable with that, right? And then let's just go one more notch. Overseeing the construction of Cinderella's castle at Magic Kingdom. Okay, there's no hands, right? The point is pretty clear, right? As things get more complex, your level of comfort in overseeing these things has to be equal to your experience and your ability. So it's pretty simple. Okay, So then, how technical should a digital PM be? Well, again, that's the point. Your level of technical ability and experience should be commensurate with the complexity of the project, product, app, website you're managing. And so what's interesting then is how do you do that? How do you measure up or level up, so to speak, to more complex projects? I want to talk to you guys a little bit about this concept called flow. Is anybody familiar with that? It's not anything that's super new. Yeah. So there was a Hungarian psychologist. His name is Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. Say that 10 times fast. Okay. So he dedicated his life to studying happiness and what makes people happy. And he published this book about this concept of flow. I'm not sure exactly. I think it was in the 70s that he published it. But essentially what he's talking about is when you're performing a task or you're doing some sort of work, there's this state that you can find yourself in where work is just pouring out of you naturally. It just comes to you. It's not difficult, it's not hard, it's not challenging, it's just perfect for you. And he uses some examples of different people, like athletes, for example, right? They're playing on like the largest professional stage and they're just super successful, right? They have the ability to focus and just block everything out and they nail it. Or like a musician who is just sitting there composing music and they're in their flow and things are just pouring out of them. And so he talks about how we can find our flow channel. And what's interesting is he made this chart. And do you notice the X and the Y axes? What are the two factors to finding your flow? It has to do with challenge, how difficult something is, versus skill level. Isn't that interesting? Right? Essentially, you need to be able to match up your skill or your ability to the challenge or complexity of the project or the thing, the task that you're working on. Those should intersect, and if they are properly matched and aligned, you'll find yourself in flow. And remember that he studied happiness. So if you do that, you're going to find yourself in a happy state. Now, if you do not align yourself from a skill and a challenge perspective, what can happen? You get bored, right? If maybe it's just too easy for you, or if maybe it's too challenging for you, you get anxious. And so let's illustrate it. Let's kind of use an example and put this into perspective. Anybody here play tennis? Okay, some tennis players. So when you learn how to play tennis, what do? You start off really simple. Maybe you grab a friend, a partner, maybe you have a parent, a sibling, a coach, and you start off and you're just like, you're hitting the ball over the net, and you're working on your forehands, and you're good, and you're starting to feel really good about yourself, and you're like, hey, let's hit backhands. So you hit backhands, and you're like, that's hard, let's go back to forehand. Okay. And so you hit forehands, and then eventually you're like, okay, now I can do backhand, forehand, and then you're like, let me work on my serves, and you're crushing it. Now, after a while, you can keep doing that if you want infinitely, but what's going to happen? You're going to get bored because you're just going to be doing the same thing over and over and over again, and it's not really challenging for you, right? So you have two options. You can keep doing the same thing. You can keep your skill level kind of, a little bit better. You can grow it, but your challenge level is low. It's no good. Your other option is to increase the challenge level. So you increase your challenge level, right? But you see where the 3 is positioned here? It's not all the way at the top. So the point is that you increase the challenge level just a little bit. You're not like out there trying to play with Roger Federer or Serena Williams, right? Because what would happen if you did that is you would just get frustrated and you would quit and you would slam your racket on the ground and that was it. You would walk off. So you just want to increase your level a little bit. Maybe you go find somebody who's got a little bit more experience. You start playing with them. It may be a little bit frustrating at first, but you're going to hit 1 good shot, another good shot, 3 good shots, 4 good shots, and eventually your skill is going to start to increase and you're going to find yourself back in flow, right? So you have this steady growth over time of increasing the challenge level, growing our skill, increase the challenge level, grow our skill, and we find ourselves in flow and we're happy. We're content. So he took this chart, it's interesting, and what he did is he plotted out how we might feel at different points in the the channel if we're not in the flow channel. And look at some of the feelings that we can have, you know. If we're not in flow, we can be apathetic, bored. It says relaxed, but that's actually a negative connotation there, because if you're too relaxed, you're too confident, you're too contented, you're not growing, right? Or we may be worried if the challenge level is way too high. We could be super anxious. There's a point where we can be like, you know, we're increasing our level of alertness, right? We're starting to get focused. But notice that's as we get closer to flow. So again, the point is we need to make sure that our skill level is commensurate to the challenge level. Okay, so how do I find my flow? That's the question, right? How do I increase in my technical abilities over time so that I can be happy and I can really enjoy the work that I do as a digital PM? So there's this thing called the 4% rule. And so there's a gentleman who studied also flow, and he runs I think it's called the Flow Genome Project now, and he continued on with Csikszentmihalyi's work, and he came up with this 4 things to unlocking your flow. One was freedom from fear, basically. The other happens to be focus, so we need to focus ourselves. The third one has to do with asking for feedback, and the fourth letter, F, is 4%. And what he found is that as we challenge ourselves over time, as we make things slightly harder, we want to try to do it in 4% increments, because that's how we're not going to find ourselves too anxious. So we need to make these gradual increases and ticks in our abilities over time. So 4%. The point is, don't shoot for the moon. Don't be like, hey, I've never coded before, so I'm going to build an application now, right? Scale it back a little bit. Maybe just start learning a little bit about HTML or CSS, or maybe just read up on something. So what can you do? I thought I fixed this. Guess I didn't. Okay, improve your skills and deepen your knowledge. So one of the things that you can do is volunteer, right? So is there some sort of pet project? Maybe there's a nonprofit in your community that you're really passionate about, or maybe even you've got a family friend and they need some help with their web technology. Offer your time, give of yourself. See if you can improve their technology in some way, shape, or form. Maybe it's just building a super small website for them, or maybe it's helping them out with, I don't know, their email, or getting them some sort of a little marketing campaign going, getting their Google business listing up to date. But help them out and start to push yourself from a skills perspective a little bit. Build your own website or app. And one of the things that I encourage you to do is try to use the technologies that your teams use on a day-to-day basis. So if your teams work with WordPress, try to build a WordPress website. Download a theme, download some plugins, start to figure out how you get this thing all together. If you work with Drupal, use that. If you work with some sort of other .NET-based CMS, maybe it's I don't know, Orchard CMS or Ectron or something like that, use those things. Or if it's an application, right, maybe a mobile app or something like that, you can build simple mobile apps with some pretty cool tools. So I encourage you to do that. But make sure that you use the tools that your team does, because the idea is to become versed with these technologies. Educate yourself. So take a course online, right? There's so many amazing courses. There's lynda.com. There's also General Assembly. They have online and offline programs. There's Code Academy. There's Udemy, right? Maybe you want to take a little course on learning how to program, doing some basic HTML, CSS. Start reading more. I hate reading, but that's why I listen to podcasts. That's the third suggestion. But if you find a great blog, somebody that you want to follow, somebody that is a real influencer in your sphere, start to read their blog a little bit more and get yourself familiar. And again, listen to podcasts. That's a really great way to learn more about the different technologies that are out there. Annoy your team. I really think this is an important one. Ask them questions, and ask them lots of questions. Have them take just a few minutes out of their day to explain something to you, be it a decision that was made or how they're doing something. They're more than happy to take time out of their day to show you what it is that they're doing and why they're doing it. And it's really just going to benefit both of you in the long run. So I really encourage you to do that. Annoy your team, ask tons of questions, but do it in a respectful manner, not like, why'd you do that way? You know, like ask them because you genuinely and sincerely want to know. But wait, there's so much more, right? So there's a ton of stuff when it comes to digital, right? There's information architecture, like how do you create a good sitemap and a good structure. I gave this whole talk on IA, and the thing is like you can have the most beautiful website, right, or the most beautiful app, but if no one can find the information on it, then it's useless. It's garbage. So how do you create a good IA? What about UX design? We had some awesome talks about like design operations here yesterday, right? We learned a lot about that. Web accessibility, what are some of the best practices for making the web accessible to people of all abilities? That's really, really important. QA and cross-browser testing tools and devices. How do we use these tools to be able to deliver that defect-free product that we talked about earlier? I think you should learn a little bit about analytics and SEO. How many times do your clients ask you these questions, right? They do all the time because they just expect, like, you're the expert, you should know this. So you should learn how to use these tools. And then, of course, there's different third-party applications that I think you want to study up on. And I'll get into each of these in a little bit more detail right now. So let's start with talking about information architecture. See, the point is that I'm trying to make here is it goes even deeper and deeper and deeper. There's so much for us to learn as digital PMs. So how do you create a content inventory, right? How do you figure out what's usable content, what's not working? How do you test that out? There's different tools and different practices like tree testing, card sorting, click testing. Are you familiar with those processes and how we can leverage those to create a better IA and a better user experience for people in the long run? What about conversion path mapping? If you're doing one of those vaunted e-commerce projects, or if you're doing something that's like a lead gen project, how do you ensure and identify the paths that you want your users to take to arrive at creating some sort of a conversion? And then, of course, there's journey mapping exercises. So how do we walk through the journey that a user takes to be able to take some sort of an action, be it online or offline, and how those things could potentially intersect with one another? See, there's a lot, right? UX design. So when it comes to UX, are you familiar with all of the wireframing tools that your team uses? We heard a little bit about some of the design stacks that were used here, the sketches, the Adobe products. There's all sorts of different wireframing tools that exist out there as well. And then, do you have a good understanding of like the different responsive design principles? It's not new, but still, do you understand how things should and could look on different viewport sizes so that it's the most usable for people? And I say this, like, yes, we have designers, but have an opinion on what good design is, right? You all use the internet, yes, right? Like, you know what a good user experience is and you know what one is not. So like, have an opinion and don't be afraid to share it with your teams. In a respectful manner, of course. But yeah, just know what good design is and what good design means to you as a DPM. Web accessibility. Okay, so this one is really kind of important to us at Oomph. I think it's something that we really need to work hard on as a digital community in general, is making sure that the web is an accessible place for everybody. So we have these the standards that are provided to us by an organization called WCAG 2.1. WCAG, I'm not exactly sure how you say it, but it's a system of standards that was put out by the W3 Consortium as to how we can make the web more accessible for people. And there's 4 key components to it, that everything is perceivable, and so that has to do with like legibility, color contrast, font sizes, those types of things. Having an operable user interface and navigation. Have you guys ever tried to navigate your products just using a keyboard? It's really hard. It's really hard. But that's what people who maybe are visually impaired have to go through on a daily basis. So I urge you to try to learn a little bit more about how you can make your products and your projects more accessible for these people. Having an understandable information in UI. So if, let's say you have video, right, or images, do you have captioning? Do you have alt text? Do you have things that can explain the user interface to people who can't necessarily see these things? And then it mentions having robust content and reliable interpretation. So again, that has to do with the content that we put out and making sure that again, you have the transcripts of videos and things like that. So let's really work as a DPM group, learning more about web accessibility so that we can talk about it with our teams and our clients and really make the web a better place. QA testing. There's a lot to do with QA testing. There's maybe peer code review processes. There's cross-browser testing devices and tools that we can use to make sure that things work on not only your mobile phone, but some people still use IE11, right? Those people should not use IE11, but they do. So we need to make sure that it still works there. Performance testing, we talked about that earlier. Is your site performant? Is it fast? Because if it's not, from an SEO perspective, it's really going to negatively impact the user experience, and it can impact your ranking factors. And then making sure that it's secure. Do you guys do pen tests? Do you make sure that your sites, your applications aren't hackable, and that they follow best practice? These are things that we need to study up on and learn about. Analytics and SEO. Okay, so there's Google Analytics. There's Google Tag Manager. There's all sorts of heat mapping tools. There's like ClickTail and Crazy Egg, and like there's a sea of tools that are out there. And then like, are you from a core SEO perspective? Are you guys still talking about meta keywords? Like those were irrelevant 10 years ago. So like, what are best practices from an SEO perspective, and are you able to intelligently talk about those with your client when you're talking about content strategy? And then two, we think about CRMs and email marketing tools and how those can fit into things. Automated email marketing is huge now. There's so many applications out there that we need to know about so that we can integrate these things with our tools and we can give people the best possible experience. And then again, there's like third-party tools up the wazoo, right? So there's like, again, marketing automation, CRM, personalization, split testing tools. There's all sorts of translation services out there. Are you familiar with the digital landscape? The point here is there's a ton to learn about. Would you not agree? So we as DPMs, we've got to up our game a little bit at a time. We got to make sure that, from a skill level, that it measures up and it's commensurate to the challenge or the complexity of the projects that we're working on. But there are a lot of benefits to doing so, right? It's not, we shouldn't just do this just because. There's a ton of benefits that come along with doing it, and I think it's important to think about those things because that can really motivate us to try to step our game up a little bit. So what are a couple of those things? It increases empathy. So when you understand how something is built, is it not true that you're more likely to understand the pitfalls and the challenges, right? Like, how many of you have ever walked into your engineers, or your developers, or your designers, or whatever, and you've been like, why is this taking so long? Do they appreciate that? No. Or like, oh, how come you're having problems with your local development environment again, right? But when you understand that these things are hard, it's really challenging, it builds a little bit of empathy for you. So like, just personal experience, I asked that question. Why is this so hard? So I decided that I was going to set up a local development environment for a project. So there was beautiful instructions in GitHub, and it took me 2 days. So like, whereas it takes a developer like 30 minutes. But I got it done. But I understood that it was super challenging and that there were a lot of technical difficulties in doing so. A lot of roadblocks that I had to overcome. So it built my empathy for these guys. I now appreciate, like, this stuff is hard, so cut them some slack. It improves communication. When you speak a common language, you are more likely to feel heard and understood, and the same goes for your team. So have you ever had a developer, engineer, designer come in and they start talking to you about something and they're like, does that make sense? And like, you go like this, but in your mind you're going like this. You have no clue what they're talking about, right? So, but if you understood what they were talking about, you would have better communication there. Does anybody like to travel? Yeah, right. When you travel abroad, how important is it to you to learn a few phrases of the language spoken in the area that you go to? Super important, right? First of all, people appreciate it on the other end, right? You say a greeting, you say thank you say hello. They're super appreciative of that, and normally they're like, nah, I speak English anyway, so it's cool, I was just messing with you, when they pretend that they don't. But it really changes their disposition a little bit. And so the same could be said of our engineers, right? When we start speaking the language with them, when we start talking about like, oh, that's really, you're like, yeah, so you're gonna cut a new branch for that and Git? They're like, what? Like, what does that mean? Or you start talking about maybe some sort of, I don't know, code level thing, like, hey, so I was looking at this, I was inspecting element in Chrome, and I noticed in this div that it doesn't have the correct class here. And they'd be like, you're right, that's pretty cool. And so it would improve the communication between the two groups, right? So learn a little bit more about the language. Learn how to talk the talk. Learn how to speak with your developers, your engineers, your designers. It really will improve communication, and it will make their life better, and it will make your life better. It builds trust and confidence. Now, I've heard a lot of people up on stage here talk about trust and how you have to trust your team, right? You need to trust your team, and you do. But would you not agree that trust is not inherent? You don't walk into a room and be like, I trust you. Yeah. Wow. I mean, you work for a company and you have a certain measure and level of trust because, well, number one, you work for that company. Number two, you trust that the people who own that company that you agreed to work for hire good people, and so you think that they have some skills, but trust still needs to be built over time, right? And so when you understand generally how long it takes to complete a task, to choose the right approach, to deliver something on time and on budget, as you understand that a little bit better, and someone comes up to you and says like, hey guy, like this is going to take me at least another day, you're not going to be like, what? You're going to trust them, and you're going to say, yeah, that's a really complex problem. I absolutely believe that you need another day. So it builds trust, and it's going to build confidence in your team if you understand what it is that they're trying to do. It can help you create more predictable timelines too. So if you understand, again, how long it takes to do something in general, how long it takes to complete a task, it really will. It will contribute to your understanding of how long it takes to do something. And so you can create timelines, and you can do a better job of ensuring that you're going to deliver the product or the app, the website, whatever it is, on time. Excuse me. And then I also think that it will empower you to help your teams more, right? So, that emergency call comes in and the client's freaking out and they're like, this doesn't work, I don't know what to do. You won't instantly have to be like, hold on, I've got to go find a developer or an engineer. You might feel confident enough to go in and assess the issue yourself. Now that doesn't mean that you're going to hop in and start like squashing the bug and like writing lines of code, but you could assess what the problem is, and you could detect if it's something that is actually an emergency, if it's something that maybe you could fix, is there a workaround, or does this actually need to get escalated up to, say, some sort of developer right off the bat. But it empowers you to kind of like be that front line of defense and really help your team out, because you're a little bit more technical. You understand what these things are, right? I also think that it helps you to communicate the value of your work better. Remember when I mentioned that, why is this taking so long question earlier? Who asks that more than your clients, right? They're the ones that ask it the most. Like, why does this take so long? I don't understand. That costs how much? But when you understand how complex these things are and how much time it takes to build them, you're in a much better position to help explain and communicate the value of the work that you and your team are doing. So like, you're there to really promote your team and to help understand the client. No, like this has value. And it's gonna create a better relationship with you, your team, and your clients in the long run. And of course, I really think it's gonna increase your level of happiness and satisfaction. Nobody wants to be stagnant, right? Everybody wants to grow. We've talked about that. When you challenge yourself to learn new things, you're gonna continually grow. You're gonna keep being in that flow channel. You're gonna be happy, you're gonna be content, and you're gonna be satisfied with your career and your job, your position. So in summary, how technical should you be, right? Well, it still depends. There's no right answer here, right? But a digital PM's technical abilities and their experience should match up with the complexity of the project. I think that's pretty clear, right? So if you are finding yourself kind of a little bit stagnant and you want to do something bigger, harder, you got to level up. You got to increase your skills so that you can match that challenge and that complexity. And does it even matter? Yes, it really does. It absolutely matters. And we can see that there's a ton of benefits to doing so, to like leveling up, bringing our game up to the next level. And if we do so, in the end, ultimately, you're just going to be in a better position to do what? Hit deadlines, manage the budget, coordinate resources and talent, make sure that you have a quality-free deliverable, and you have satisfaction and happy clients. And you know what else? You'll be happy too. Thanks.
Thank you, Matt. We probably have a minute or two for a question. Does anybody have a question for Matt? Feel free to yell out if I'm not seeing you. Oh, right here in the front. That's perfect. I'll give you my mic.
Do you have any podcasts that you would recommend?
Oh, man. There's like a How It's Built podcast, and it actually has nothing to do necessarily with technology, but it helps to get you in the mindset of learning how to build things and what it takes to build them. And I think like that's probably my favorite one. Yeah.
One more, maybe?
Did I scare you
If there's
all?
a hand up.
I had one guy say to
There's
me,
one
I
right back there.
won't tell you who it is, but he was like, does this mean I have to learn about hosting and figure that stuff out? And I always get people who say like, I'm not a developer. I know that.
Hey.
Hey.
Can you recommend any like trainings for PM to be more technical? Is there like any online courses that the PMs can take?
Yeah, there's actually a ton. There's like Code Academy is a really good one. And like, again, I don't know that I would recommend something specifically because everybody's circumstance is very different, the types of projects that you manage. But again, I think like Code Academy has a ton of good stuff. Lynda.com has a ton of good stuff. You can get Lynda courses, I think, through LinkedIn training as well. So like, there's so much stuff online that you guys have access to that's cheap. It's only like a couple of bucks a month really to do it. And and it can really help you to level up your ability and your skills.
Thanks.
Yeah, cool.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt.